it's time to slow down and listen in. I want to welcome my next guest, Beryl Solomon. An entrepreneur and business leader at heart, Beryl created Poplar, a modern drugstore in 2017 after personally discovering natural medicine solutions. Beryl added cannabis to her health and wellness routine and decreased her dependence on pharmaceutical, anti-anxiety, and antidepressants. The journey was challenging, and Beryl was inspired to make the natural drug space more easily accessible and understandable. She believes in the motto, feeling good should be simple. She is a self-proclaimed weed mom and is here to tell you why she is so proud to be the cannabis poster child. Welcome, Beryl.
Thank you.
I wore my special sweater for you.
When I saw the tips of it, I was going to ask.
My cannabis sweater. Mm-hmm.
I love it. I'm needing to get one of those.
I got to see the label.
Yeah, you have to tell me where it's from.
I'll have to send it to you.
Please do. I wear a little diamond stud that's a pot leaf and it's funny who notices and who, so sometimes people will be like, I'll have had multiple conversations with people at the pickup line for my kids, whatever it may be. And finally they'll be like, so can I ask you about your earring, and I'm like, yes, of course you can.
I love it. And It's still such an interesting, so I just came back from Aspen. We chatted about that a little bit, and walking into the dispensaries still feels illegal and weird and bizarre. And I'm like, okay, is it like, the early 1900s and prohibition? Is that what it was like, where you got to open up this special, behind the fireplace situation with all the bottles of alcohol? It is bizarre because you are in a place like Colorado where weed is, legal for recreational use. And yet there's still this kind of fuzzy, I'm just not comfortable feeling like I'm hiding the bag. So walking around like everyone's high in Aspens, right? I'm hiding the bag and my stuff. So tell me about your personal journey with cannabis and why are you such a big proponent?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm 41 years old. I have 2 kids. I have a husband, and, a household and all of those responsibilities that I think probably many of your listeners resonate with. And a couple years ago, I had a conversation with my doctor and I was like, I'd love to understand what my alternatives are for my anti-anxiety medication.
And you were taking that at that time, right? So you're on anti-anxiety. Okay.
So I was on Prozac, the generic form of Prozac. I actually lost my brother in a tragic accident in 2011, which is it is an important part of the story because there is a time and a place for pharmaceuticals. I am actually not one of those people who's like, no, never, I give my kids child Advil, they call it purple medicine, all that kind of good stuff. But I do think, and this is part of sort of what I've learned on my journey, that we're sort of too quick to jump into those and to not understand maybe what a more natural alternative is. But again, I do believe there's a time and a place for pharmaceuticals. But
I think we're also a culture of let's just take a pill for that. I dealt with that with my husband and having, high cholesterol. I'm like, and he was just ready to take a statin. And I was like, that's a really harsh medication. Why don't we make some dietary and lifestyle choices, make some changes there first and see, obviously not everything can be remedied, with diet and exercise or natural remedies, but, let's at least consider it as an option.
Yes, for sure. So, and I always do start with the unfortunate story of my brother, because it is important for me to say that it's not that I had struggled with suicide I did not struggle with mental health. Of course I'm a productive overachiever, those sorts of things, but I definitely, I didn't struggle with depression and anxiety my entire life, and it was not a desperate situation. So I always think it's important to preface that. So with that, I had both of my children. I was on Prozac through my pregnancies, which is also something I'm very open to talking about. I had my babies. I had finished breastfeeding. I had done all those things. And I said, what are some natural alternatives? I've always been kind of green in the beauty space and all of that. Like, what are my alternatives? And literally my doctor laughed at me. He was like, we don't recommend women like you go off their anti-anxiety.
What is women like you? So very high strung.
Yes,
exactly. Those are fighting words.
So I was like, I will never be seeing you again. And, pretty much left and was like, all right, well, I'm going to turn to the internet and see what the internet has to say to me. And cannabis just kept coming up in my journey. It kept popping up on the, on the screen, when I was talking to people, but it was always in hushed rooms and all of those things. And I was like, there's got to be something there. And cannabis was legal in California. And I went to see friends and I was like, take me to a dispensary. Like, what is this all about?
So had you smoked weed before or taken cannabis prior to this kind of discovery?
In college,
okay,
I had certainly used it recreationally. I would never say that I ever considered it sort of medicinal in any way, shape, or form.
Got it.
And I had that classic brownie. So, I smoked from a bong. I had that classic brownie experience where someone gives you a brownie, you don't ask, you take it. You're like, I think my head's going to fall off. You go to sleep, you wake up and you're fine, like all of those things.
Yeah.
It was not, and I had been exposed to it. I mean, I, live in New York, all those things that it just like, and I had been in places where it was offered to me. I'm just saying, maybe my husband has always used it, maybe. But it's never spoken to me. It was dirty and it smelled funky and it was in a thing and there were ashes everywhere. And I was just like,
you don't want to smell like weed. You'd be the car that rolls through where they're hotboxing the car and you roll the windows down and like Snoop Dogg is playing,
literally.
Right.
And
yeah.
I still, and I call it bongs and thongs. I still had this perspective of cannabis being something that you needed, long nails, deep cleavage, and tight jeans. And that is totally stereotypical. And I am owning that fact. But I was like, that's not me. I'm a, I don't know, luxury toting handbag, like, that's not
type A overachiever. Yeah,
exactly. I'm that. People like me, So I was like, oh, I don't know, but it was legal in California already. And so it already was taking on this sort of different vibe there. So honestly, went to a dispensary, asked a bunch of questions, left with more questions. Reached out to a bunch of different doctors, asked more questions, and eventually found my way through to someone who would help me create essentially boundaries around how much cannabis to try, how much Prozac to decrease, how much. And so I did it on my own. I kept a log. And I mean, I did it on my own, but I knew I had a doctor that I had told about this. So if God forbid there was a problem.
So you at least had someone to check in with.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was hard to find. And even this doctor was like, a friend of mine. And it was even difficult for her at the time to advise this because she could, in theory, have lost her license because it was not a solution that was discussed. It very much was not. But I was like, what do I have to lose? I'll try it. If it doesn't work, keep taking the Prozac.
Did you have any side effects coming off of the Prozac? Because I know postpartum for me, of course I didn't do it under a doctor's care. And I was like, well, shit, I'm just going to stop taking this Zoloft. And I had brain zingers and I was like, what the hell is happening to me?
Yeah, no, I went off. So essentially what we got my prescribing doctor to do was so Prozac comes, I'm not a pharmacist, but at least from being a patient, I know that it comes in capsules of different quantities. So there's a 20 milligram capsule, there's a 40 milligram capsule. I think if you're taking 80, you take 220, whatever it is. So we called in the prescription and broke it up so that I had 5s. So I was able to decrease 5 at a time. And I did that very slowly, right? So I would decrease 5. So no, I didn't really have these zingers or the oh my God, I'm freaking out, or oh my God, what the hell did I do? It
does make you wonder though, right? What it's doing to your brain. For me, I had postpartum depression with both of my girls and it was just, I took, I think Zoloft for 18 months with one and maybe a couple of years with the other, which is long past postpartum. But it does make you wonder what's going on in your brain. I'm like, if I'm stopped taking this medicine and I'm being zapped internally, red flag.
Yeah, exactly. It's real. And that is also to say, and again, right. I'm not a doctor. So I say this all the time when I have these conversations, there is a time and a place, right? And postpartum depression is a real thing and all of those, right? And it doesn't mean that you should grit and bear it, right? But like, why isn't there at least another option presented to you or in discussion on the table for you to understand, here are the pros and cons of this? Or maybe it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? Like, I also think we live in a society of like black and white, right? So it's like, well, you're going to either be natural or you're going to be, you're going to be a weed mom or you're going to be a pill mom or a wine mom or what. It's like, no, like why does there have to be that delineation? Why is it so rigid? So yeah, I mean, I essentially would be like, okay, I'm going to, add CBD and take my prescription down and do that for a couple of weeks. And then I'm going to add THC. And so I now take a combination. So when I say I use cannabis for my health and wellness routine, I take a combination of hemp-derived CBD, which is naturally legal, and THC, which is psychotropic and will make you feel high depending on the amount that you take. And I have a regimen that I essentially take every day. I take a tincture of CBD in the morning, so fully functional, not high. I consider it like a vitamin. In the afternoon, I take what I call a microdose of THC, which is literally 1 milligram to 2 milligrams, depending on if I'm driving, if I'm like, what am I doing? I mean, 1 milligram is, does not make me feel high in any way, shape or form.
So it just takes the edge off.
That's it. It's literally, I mean, it's better than popping a Xanax. Like
Right.
I can only make that comparison because I have popped a Xanax before.
Right.
But
Which
Xanax
is like
makes you feel
super
loopy.
hard. Yeah, you're loopy. You definitely don't want to have a glass of wine and you shouldn't be driving, and it's super highly
shouldn't
addictive.
be driving, shouldn't be picking up your kids, shouldn't be, helping them with homework. And
it is addictive. I mean,
and it's addictive.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was a game changer for me. And so I looked at the space and I was like, oh my God, if I'm feeling this way, and my background is a business person. I ran or worked for several fashion companies. I like to say I really sit at the sort of intersection of like, is this a good product, but that's also going to get to the right place at the right time so people are going to buy it? Because you could have the best product ever, but if it doesn't land that way, it might as well, right, fall like a tree falling in the forest. So I already understood and have a vision of the world that's like, oh, this is a good idea. What's the business there? Is there a monetary opportunity? Is there a impact opportunity, right? I see the world sort of in both. There's like monetary, there's, making people feel better. There are all these things. And if you can find a way to bring them together, you've sort of reached a bit of a holy grail. I think especially as working moms, we're kind of like, oh, well, we need to make money because we have to because life costs money. But like, if we can also make an impact, like, oh, that is just, it's incredible. And so I really saw this as one of those opportunities. I'm good at spotting trends. That's the fashion part in me. And I was like, CBD is going to be everywhere. So this was pre-CBD explosion. I knew CBD was on the horizon. I knew it was going to be a big deal. And I said, you know what? Let me start in the CBD world because it will be faced with less
scrutiny,
scrutiny, criticism, fear, because it doesn't make you high. Now, with it comes a whole ton of education, which in and of itself is challenging. I mean, there are people still today, years into sort of the boom of CBD that still are like, wait, what? It won't make me high. Wait, CBD is also in weed? Wait, it comes from hemp? I mean, it's so confusing.
And now they're coming up with CBN now is like this new part of the plant that they have no idea. They're still uncovering all of these healing modalities within the plant, all these different strains or
That's exactly
whatever,
right.
derivatives.
Yeah. So they're all called cannabinoids. So cannabis is made up of more than 130 cannabinoids. We literally discover more every day. And those were some of the sort of alphabet soup that you were just sharing. There's a CBG, there's a CBN. So there are all of these different compounds. So I see that the future of cannabis is going to be that you go into a dispensary and you say, I want, I want something for the morning where I am able to focus. I take it with my coffee and I go for it. I want something in the afternoon that takes the edge off. Instead of that additional cup of coffee, when I feel myself revving up, I still need to buckle down and focus for a few more hours. Then I need something to start to take the edge off in the evening instead of a glass of wine. I can still be present and not, gain weight, get angry, et cetera, and I want something to help me sleep. And you'll be able to go in and experience that and pick out, sort of be like, I want this for this, this for this, this for this, versus now we just sort of have this, conception that it's like, we just take weed or it's just cannabis, where like it is so nuanced to your point, and we're discovering more and more every day that we will be able to really create these like specific cocktails, if you will.
Yeah, like treatment plans.
Literally. And hopefully, you're right. Then you'll also go and be like, all right, just like I got my, heirloom tomatoes from the farmer's market, I got my cannabis from my favorite dispensary, and I got my, I don't know, whatever else, I got my vibrator, my whatever other like things, but it's all just going to be meshed into this, hopefully into this world in which we live. And instead of walking into, the wine shop and getting 20 bottles of wine because you're having a dinner party, you're going to get a couple bottles of wine and a couple of packages of edibles, and like, no one's going to wake up with a hangover.
Yeah. Amen to that. I mean, that's my whole reason for switching to clean wine too, right? So understanding all the toxins. I like eat totally organic, clean, gluten-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free, blah, 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 free of everything. And then I go drink a bottle of toxins and wonder why I feel like shit. So here's a question. Why THC and CBD? When people are saying, oh, CBD just did it totally for me, it took the anxiety away. Like, why not just sticking with the not psychotropic effects?
So when I say I'm pro cannabis and cannabis should be a tool in your health and wellness toolkit, I mean, it could be any of those derivatives. Mm-hmm. So if CBD does it for you, amazing. So when people are like, CBD changed my life, or, oh my gosh, I mean, Beyonce just came out and said CBD changed her life. Like, it doesn't get any like better than that. It is a real thing. It really works. But I think I make a lot of alcohol analogies because people understand alcohol, right? So, some people like wine, some people like tequila. CBD is a real thing, right? It helps with inflammation. It helps with pain. It helps with balance. THC is different. THC is going to affect your brain. It's going to help you think more creatively, or stop your mind from racing so much, or help you sleep. And so, I believe, and most of the research shows, that the best CBD products also have small amounts of THC in them, not enough THC to get you high. And it's from hemp, which means by definition, it's less than 0.3% THC. But I just think, again, yes, you can be a fan of CBD, you can embrace that, and that can be your tool. And maybe later you'll be ready to try something else, and maybe it will be CBN or CBG or right, whatever it may be. There was this great sort of article, that cartoon, that when CBD started exploding, it was like sort of one plant that was labeled THC talking to one plant that was labeled CBD, and the one that was THC was like, looked at CBD and was like, whoever did your PR, like, I want to hire them. Like, they did an amazing job. And it really is, so much of it is just PR, our understanding of it. And I hope that we can understand how to use different things at different times to achieve different results. And it's not all or nothing. And it's not, I always smoke weed or I never smoke weed. Like, I don't know. Can't we just do all of these things when and how we feel like it, within moderation? That's really what I sort of stand for.
I mean, because like even the words like weed mom, to me, it's that like long nails. I mean, it's kind of trashy.
It's hard. It's hard.
I mean, that's just what my mind goes to. I mean, I also have a visual of a wine mom, which is, slightly puffy, overweight, not sleeping well, because, and it's interesting, as I got really kind of clean eating at the beginning of this year and did a cleanse with my membership. And I tried to drink wine after I did that. And it was almost impossible, like conventional wine. And that's kind of what put me on this path to understanding clean wine. But the effects, the physical and emotional effects of alcohol are so hard on the system. And as we age as women, it's like, what affects your hormones? Everything. Alcohol affects your hormones. The not sleeping. I mean, every tiny little thing as we continue to age and get toward menopause and beyond, and I'm 40, also it's hard to continue to want to drink because the effects are so intense. And it's like, I get anxiety about going out with friends. I'm like, oh God, I've got a dinner on Wednesday. I can't have a drink there because I know I'm going to feel like shit. I'm going to wake up at 2:10 a.m. and lay there all night with like a racing heart and flush, so having an alternative, I think is nice, but do you think the stigma will ever go away? I mean, if we have more conversations about it, I mean, everybody's judgy as shit anyway. So, I mean, you can have that, but
I don't think it's ever going to, I don't think it's going to go away, but I'm so hopeful that it just like sort of steadily declines. Right. And so that I hope that when people like me, who look like me and sound like me, talk about this as something that they do and that they do regularly and that they do in their home, and they plan to, when their kids are old enough, have those conversations, and we don't really, not like, and we don't hide it. Exactly. I hope that we'll have an opportunity with the next generation. I mean, our world is pretty screwed up right now, and we have a lot of things we need to, I think, teach our kids. There's a lot going on. And so I think, I really hope that it gets better, that we are more open. And I think when we look at things like same-sex marriage, right? Like there are things that have that public acceptance has sort of revolutionized from where it was. I don't know. I hope so. I hope it will. The amazing thing about cannabis and how it's different from wine, and the thing that is so cool, like the nerdy part of me gets excited about it, is there's a system in our body called an endocannabinoid system, and it is literally built to absorb this plant. It is a lock and key system. It knows what to do with this plant when we put it in our body. Back to what you said before, like no one ever can say that about alcohol. Like
there's no alcohol gene unless you're an alcoholic. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like there is on no planet, right? Is there a thought process that's like, oh, well, alcohol works with our bodies? Like this just isn't. And so if we can just get sort of to the root of that and talk about how, it's plant medicine, whether you're self-medicating, right? Which I think a lot of wine moms are, or whether if you're using it for fun or for medicine or for sort of the combination of the two, which is personally what I believe in. Like, how amazing is it that there's a plant that can be both medicinal and fun? Like that's like cool, sort of mind blowing. But I think hopefully, again, as we sort of, this science is now known and we don't need to uncover it. It's on the internet. And I hope that also will take us to a different place, that maybe some of this stigma, if not all of it, is decreased as we move on. But we have a lot of work to do, a lot.
Well, and I live in Indiana, which is a deeply red state. I mean, we just started selling alcohol on Sundays at noon for like a few hours, just like a year or two ago. So, are you in a state where it is medically or recreationally legal?
Great question. So I'm in New York, and New York is currently in quite a complicated spot. So New York is medicinally legal, has been for a couple of years.
But you have to have you have to have a prescription or a medical card or what? Okay.
That's exactly right. Now, it is not that difficult to get the medical card.
Do you have to go to a specific doctor to that?
Nope. There are services that you can call. And one that I like for any listeners is called Presto Doctor, Presto, Presto Doctor. And we can put it in the show notes if anyone wants to look.
Yeah, for sure.
You do a Zoom call and you talk about, are you stressed? Are you anxious? What your things are that would get you your prescription. It's relatively easy. The problem is, it's a racket because they charge you a lot of money to do it and to get the card, which by definition, sort of boxes out a lot of people who would benefit from the medicinal aspects of cannabis, but can't. I mean,
and what does a card cost these days?
The card, I think I'm actually up to renew mine soon, so I can tell you the new cost. And I think the card lasts for 2 years. I believe it was $250,
which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I
mean, and you have to, yes, and so you pay the money, you get on the thing, and the cost when you go into a dispensary of these products is so far above what it is in the underground market. The illicit, the gray, all those things. We don't call it the black market anymore, but it is so the products are so much more expensive than that, and so much more expensive than going over the border when you're in either going over the border to Massachusetts, or when you're in California, bringing it back on the airplane. Like, that it's really, it becomes cost prohibitive. And we would be remiss to not have a conversation about the fact that so many reasons that cannabis is frowned upon and is illegal is because it was created as a way to systematically be a racist society towards Black and brown people. I mean, that's the history of it. And again, we can share some links in the notes. That's sort of a whole nother conversation. But as a very privileged white woman, it is my responsibility, I believe, in every single one of these conversations to acknowledge that, to work on paying it forward, and to understand that, what I am able to get away with is much, much different than what a woman living in, public housing who still needs cannabis for their stress, but is not allowed to, you're not allowed to smoke in public housing. You can't afford a card. I mean, the list goes on. And it just is another issue, sort of, fundamentally woven into the fabric of the challenge.
Even just decriminalizing drug offenses and how far we have yet to go to not look at, even some of the harder drugs and cocaine and heroin and, all of the fentanyl and everything. My God, we could go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, no, I'm 100% with you, which is unfortunate, right? And I don't know that the end is in sight anytime. I mean, being from the Midwest, being from Indiana, which is just a ridiculously conservative state, I mean, we will be the absolute last one to hold out for even medicinal purposes, which is sad because you look at, and we can double back into big pharma and the kind of hold and the grip that it has on our society, on women, and what it's created as far as, with the whole opioid pandemic and everything that happened that. And now those people that were addicted because the doctors told them it was okay, and now they're dying, and they're into street drugs because you can't get a freaking Vicodin prescription to save your life. I don't care if your leg was chopped off, they'll give you 3. So it's like, okay, you've created this, you don't have a solution for it, but then you're just going to take it away and then criminalize people who are seeking other methods. So that's like a whole nother thing. But I mean, there's a lot of issues with big pharma, Yeah.
And it's hard. Cannabis is so beautiful because it's so complicated in its tentacles, but it's also so hard because it's so complicated in its tentacles, right? And so again, going back to that conversation, previous thread in this conversation of like, will it be okay? Will it be acceptable? How do we get it there? I think a lot of it is understanding and recognizing those deep, somewhat shameful tentacles sometimes, and saying, you know what, that was wrong. How can we right that? Or how can we at least move it in the right direction? How is it acceptable that there are people who are introduced into the legal system and are serving time in jail for things that are now legal? Like just, sort of those basic things that blow your mind. And all of it needs to evolve in lockstep in order for it to really be acceptable and accessible.
Yeah. Let's talk about, we talked a little bit about kind of the negative physical effects of alcohol, but what are the positive effects of cannabis? What are some ailments that people could search out, this plant to heal?
So the 3, it's funny, we, for Poplar, Poplar is an e-commerce site that sells the best in legal cannabis, which today is CBD. We hope that someday we're able to sell cannabis specifically in New York.
And can you sell it in every state? Are you in all 50 states?
Yep. So it's online. And so we can ship to all 50 states. Mm-hmm. So we did a bunch of tests when we launched Poplar to sort of understand how does this resonate with people. And what we found is the sort of trifecta is pain, stress, sleep. Like if you just understand that cannabis is a tool that can affect pain, stress, and sleep, yes, it can help with sex and gut health and brain fog and all of these things. But when we really worked through with people and saw what are people clicking on, right? That's kind of the beauty of the internet. We found that those are the three unlocks. And that obviously they're connected. And then from them offshoot all the other things. But at its core, pain, stress, and sleep, first of all, every American has at least one of those as a problem. If
or not
to human,
all three. I mean, truly,
literally,
they're not sleeping, they're in pain, they're not sleeping, they're stressed out. I mean, it's just that terrible cycle that you keep going into and you're running on the hamster wheel.
And it helps you break the cycle. Like at its core, what cannabis and specifically also CBD does, it is that it helps, if you remember one thing, right, about what cannabis does, it helps your body get back to its equilibrium. It helps it get back into balance. And anytime your body is off balance, that's why you have pain. That's why you're stressed. That's why you can't sleep. And it's
inflammation. Your body's telling you something like shit is not
okay. Exactly.
You keep running at this rate.
Okay.
Right. And something's going to break down. Right. You'll be lying in a bathtub with no water, crying in a fetal position.
Literally. And like,
I've been there.
Right. And that's the thing. It's kind of like, oh my God, that is what we're learning. And it's still not giving many of us a wake up call. And that's the scary part. Right. And so, yes, pain, there are balms, there are tinctures, there's this, there are a million different ways you can take it, but not to even confuse anyone. Like, why do you turn to cannabis? In my opinion, if you have, pain, stress, and sleep, or anywhere on your, I wish I could, make these issues disappear list, then cannabis could be for you. It could be for you in a small way. It could be for you in a big way, again, but I would challenge anyone who's listening to open their mind to think about cannabis as a potential, right? I always say a tool in your wellness toolkit. It's not going to be your, magic bullet. Newsflash. There's no magic bullet. That's what you and I both talk about. Like it's no such thing. Or you know what? I would make a magic bullet, and then all would be well. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. But it is a powerful tool that is meant to work with our bodies, that is meant to work with our bodies as women. I mean, how complicated our bodies are, and the pain and stress and sleep challenges that are cycle or menopause or all of those things. Like, it's really amazing when you think about the idea that there is a plant that comes from the ground that can help you deal with those things, and just like we talk about how we want to eat food from the earth or drink wine that can, where you can identify the ingredients. If we just start to apply some of that same logic to cannabis, only then will we really start to understand this plant. And I think, back to your point, be able to accept it.
And so how long have you been off antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication?
Since 2018.
Okay. So let's get back to Poplar for a second. How many different brands do you represent? How do you decide what goes on this online site? And what is the website, by the way?
So the website is www.shop-poplar.com. So www.shop-poplar.com. So we sell probably these days around 30 brands. We love when we can to support small brands, female-owned brands, BIPOC brands. That's definitely not 100% of our assortment, but we certainly, give that a lot of credibility and credence in our, in our process. And, we really, again, we started doing this before CBD was everywhere. So a few things that make our site, I think, different from other sites is that we are not about just listing every single CBD brand that's out there. We really want to create a clear journey for customers. You're feeling this, try this. You're feeling that, try that. Layer this on for that. So we believe we're obviously carrying the best brands that, have tested their products. They don't have any, heavy metals, pesticides, et cetera, et cetera. But additionally, once we have our lineup, we really are quite regimented on not just picking something up because it's the new cool brand that blah, blah, blah launched, right? So we say, as an example, we have a great everyday tincture, or we have a great tincture that focuses on pain. I don't need another tincture that focuses on pain. And so when a brand comes to me and says, oh my God, we have this great tincture, I say, I'm super interested in your brand. I love the look of it. I love what you stand for. I love you as a founder, et cetera. But we already have that covered. as you expand your line, please let me know where you go. And I think that's a part as a brand Poplar, right? Because we're essentially telling people, we're not just trying to expand the assortment just to add more brands. We want to be there for the customers. And we're already supporting amazing small brands, most of them. And so there's not necessarily a ton of leeway just to add. And when we've done that, we've seen that it's not successful. It's not successful to the original brand, and it's not successful to the new brand. So yeah, we vet everything. We try it personally. We have relationships with the founders of all the brands. We're not this sort of like nameless, faceless e-commerce group. But with that comes a lot of challenges. We don't have a huge marketing budget. So it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of, talking with people like you, and then, sharing that with your community. And like I said, I believe in CBD, but I believe in cannabis as a whole. And so yes, buy CBD from us, but we also want to be a community that can just talk about cannabis and that can field questions like what you said, like, oh, I'm going to ask them, where do I go? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is the dispensary I've personally been to. This is why I liked it. They carry this brand that I like, right? Like just, I think personally, I want to be your best friend who uses weed, who you don't have to hide anything from. I think professionally, we want to be a very sort of legitimate organization that sells legal products. And so, I sort of have this personal mission that I don't want to cloud the legality and the sort of, black and white laws and rules around Poplar. So we kind of have these two end goals.
Well, and you're set up, if forever we, knock on wood, ever get to a national deregulation of cannabis as a whole, you'd be set up to be that kind of go-to one-stop shop with, cross our fingers. We're all still around. Your daughters aren't taking over the business and that we're still alive and kicking it. It is interesting to go out into a dispensary now that it's probably been a handful of years that I've been out to Aspen. Of course, nobody went anywhere last year, but I went in with more questions and more kind of direction. And I went in and I said, look, super intense person. I don't like being high. I said, because I get paranoid and I start plotting on you in the bathroom, which isn't a fun feeling. I don't like that. I mean, I've been at a restaurant with my friends. I'm like thinking I could hear them talking about me from like 20 feet away.
No one wants to be paranoid.
No, it's terrible. And they're like, okay, well, you definitely don't want sativa and you want a hybrid of CBD or CBN and THC. And it's a 1-to-1. And they walked me through all kinds and I was like a super low dose. And then even from that, I'll like take a bite of something, but
that's fine. Start low. Like I always say, half of everything to start. You can always take more. Mm-hmm. You can't take less. Even if you pull the trigger, you're screwed. Like,
you can't eat your way out of being high. You'll just be high.
But little tip, if you ever do get too high, CBD counters your high. So if you ever get to, which is why that 1-to-1 ratio that you mentioned is really critical. And that's a nice tool for listeners to remember. A 1-to-1 ratio is always good. But also if you ever get too high, like if you're like, oh my God, the chocolate was good and I took 3 squares and I have a friend
that just eats it because he's like, I've never really been high and we've given him so many like weed gummies, but he's like, I'm just hungry. She just has a very fast metabolism. He's just hungry. Like, and they do taste good.
We'll get you less expensive. You should be like, we can get you some less expensive gummy bears.
I'm going to get you go to CVS and get you just the orange slices over there in the little plastic bag and you can eat those. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
All right. So CBD, that's I didn't know that. And I have been in a place where I've been too high and it's like, okay, this is not fun. Yeah.
Have a tincture of CBD, take a tincture. Obviously, in addition to like take deep breaths, you're not going to die. Literally no one in the history of the world has ever died from taking cannabis or taking too much. Like you will not overdose. You may feel like that, but like
you can just go to sleep and you'll be okay.
I was going to say, close your eyes, turn the air conditioning on, and tomorrow will be a new day.
Yeah. All right. So I want to tell this little personal story. Sarah and I clear this with my husband, but he and I struggled a lot in our marriage. We've been married 14 years and together for almost 18. He was a daily weed smoker. It was when I met him. I came from a family of weed smokers. My grandfather would bring Lebanese hash back from the motherland. And my dad actually started a head shop called Karma Records, which had 30 or 40 or 50 locations in its heyday, but was really like a weed shop that sold records and tickets on the side. So, you know, I also grew up in the just say no to drugs movement, which, you know, when I found out like my entire paternal side of my family smoked weed, I was like, oh my God, the Reagans, Nancy Reagan says no, you know, just say no to drugs. I felt so bad about myself. And then I married my husband, and, you know, it was a very secretive weed habit that he had, you know, and we struggled a lot with just being present, you know, when going through, I think the dishonesty piece of just having an addiction, you know. So what do you say? And I said this in our notes, and I remember this clearly, calling like a rehab center for my husband. And they're like, okay, ma'am, what drug is he doing? I'm like, it's weed. And I felt super silly because I was like, that's dumb. Kind of, but it's also affecting our relationship and our personality. I mean, what do you say about like the effects of like, if you drink every day, you might be an alcoholic. If you smoke weed every day or eat edibles every day, you might be addicted. I mean, the addictive component to cannabis, what's your opinion?
I think you can be mentally addicted to anything. You can be addicted to eating healthy.
Exercise.
You could be addicted to, literally, you could be addicted to exercise. You could be addicted to shopping. You can be, right? So I think that like by nature and nurture and this world in which specifically as Americans, we have sort of put ourselves and the keeping up with the Joneses and all of those things. I think it's very hard to constantly remind yourself about your sense of self and be like, I'm doing this because I want it, not because I need it, sort of thing. So I think addiction, probably someday historians will look back on our time and say we're all addicted to a lot of shit right now. You know, so I think, which is very interesting. Now, can you be addicted to weed under that pretense? Yeah, you can be addicted to anything. Is it going to make you dangerous? No. Could it stress your relationships? Yes. And again, just like anything, right? Like if you're addicted to exercise, it can stress your relationship because maybe you want to stay in bed and have sex in the morning and your partner wants to get out and work out. And you're like, but this is our time. Like everything can. And I think what you said about the communication and the honesty and what we kind of talked about a little bit before, which was the moderation piece, I think making sure those are woven through anything that you do is just critical. Mm-hmm. Again, cannabis isn't going to make you dangerous, which I think is a huge difference between a lot of other drugs. Even though cannabis is considered a Schedule I drug, which is similar to cocaine and all, heroin, people become aggressive on alcohol. They become aggressive with other drugs. That won't happen with cannabis. But that doesn't mean it's not a problem. A lot of people who use cannabis take breaks to clean your system and to reset maybe your tolerance level. Maybe your tolerance is up and now you need more, and that's not where you're trying to be. So I think there are moderation ways,
I think, right? And that informed consumer and moderation, right? To look at anything.
Exactly right.
Have you found that cannabis in your relationship with your husband has affected in a positive or negative way?
Cannabis has affected our relationship in an awesome way, I think, for a lot of different reasons. Number one, my husband also, used cannabis, and when I sort of frowned upon it, and it wasn't a daily thing, but it was just sort of like, oh, that's dirty. What's that? And so I think by me understanding the plant and being able to be like, okay, this is how I prefer to consume. So can we do this together? And, this is as an example, I love this whole flower heat not burn technology called the Amora as an example. And I like that because it doesn't smell, it's clean, And he doesn't care. He's like, okay, that's what you want me to use. Like, all right, so not only in terms of just like, okay, we kind of can speak the same language now around that. And he's excited that someone's like bringing new products and everything into our home. But also, weed can be, I think, amazing in the bedroom, whether it's actually a lube made with cannabis or, being a little bit high is very helpful to stop the to-do list. And, for those women listening who maybe have this problem, like
being really present.
Takes a while to get into the moment, and you're thinking about all the things you should be doing and the other things you should be doing and the laundry to fold and the dinner and the this and if the kids walk in and the that, right? The list goes on and on. And so for me, that sort of like, this is what's in front of me, like almost sort of, stoner mentality, like is amazing to enjoy that moment. So I think that, from a bedroom perspective, from just a fun perspective, and my husband also, like, he's a big dude, like he's 6'4", like, right. So when you think about how much alcohol he needs to consume for us to maybe like be buzzed and go dancing, like, you don't want to drink that much. Like, it's just like that's not a good thing, right? And it's more enjoyable. We can wake up in the morning, play with the kids. For us, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think, just like every relationship, like there are moments when I'm like, oh, this is annoying because I didn't know you were going to get high and right. Like, but that's just relationships, mm-hmm. I think again, for us, it has added a lot. He's also, couldn't have been more supportive when I said I was going to quit my like paying job to start my own cannabis business. So I think like, you have to like take that with sort of our start in terms of, cannabis in this world. But for us, it's amazing. And I think that, but just like if you drink and your husband's like, why are you drink? Like it can be the same with anything. Yeah. So being on the same page with your partner in general can be hard, but is super important, especially, and I think with cannabis as well, but I can't understate the sex part, which we could have like a whole separate conversation about that. And if anyone has any questions, they can reach out, we can talk about it. But both from like a physical, so actually your vagina has like 1 million sensors of your endocannabinoid system and nerve endings. So that's why actually applying cannabis there sort of stimulates, relaxes, etc. So 1 million good products that will help with sex.
I think I got one from Press Pause for like a spray, an intimate spray. So we're trying that out. And to talk about these things openly, because as we continue to age or whatever age you are, and especially being moms and, trying to fit sex in plus everything else, it's hard. It's hard to get out of our head. It's hard to practice mindfulness and be in the body. And a lot of times we don't like the body that we're in. And that's, a whole separate thing. But I'm with you there. And this next question, I think I've gone back and forth and answered it myself and been like, well, because it's like cannabis or THC, let's talk about that specifically, and like kids and parenting. And I'm like, okay, I was like kind of felt against it. But then I was having this conversation like, but you went off antidepressants and that's like a whole nother thing. Why is that okay? And this isn't, how do you find that cannabis has affected you as a mother?
I love this question. I could talk for like 27 years about this question. What I will say is, eat 2 milligrams of cannabis and get on the floor with your kids and you will play trains and cards and Legos like you have never played trains and cars and Legos before, right? Because you are in that moment versus being distracted about what your responsibility should be. But again, you have your full faculties, right? I'm giving it an example, and it takes a while to find that sweet spot, right? But I think if you can find that sweet spot that takes away that shoulda, woulda, coulda anxiety and can lock in to also kind of be on their level, right? Like, it depends how old your kids are. And I think the responsibility of teenage kids, which I don't have yet, so I can't speak to that, is wholly different, right? Responsible consumption. How do you teach them? How do you say it's okay for me to use it and not okay for you? I'm talking like the 10 and younger crowd. That's where I play right now. So that's my, like, I can be in it with them without putting anyone at risk, right? Like, they still like, I drive them places, but like if we're in our home and they actually like, that's when we have some of our most awesome moments, right? Because I'm not, hold on, I got to get this email out. Hold on, I got to finish this article.
Checking your phone.
Literally. Yeah. Right. So I think, again, it's not a black and white question. It is a like within reason if you are under control, but just like I am fine with people having a glass of wine at a play date, but I'm not fine with women taking shots at a play date. Right. Like, and again, like people are like, well, we don't. It's like, well, maybe, but you have
if you sit and have and it's interesting that, I know I was going into this conversation with you and that internal dialogue that I was having of trying to find my moral compass is so interesting to observe, even though I could be like, yeah, I'm 100% on board with you. I get it. I've been there, and then it's like, I have been so preconditioned.
Of course,
drugs are bad. drugs are bad, but it's like, why is alcohol okay? I mean, my dad drinks like a bottle of wine every day. I mean, in all intents and purposes, that's kind of an alcoholic. I mean, he's functioning, but totally. So it's like, it's just having that dialogue.
1,000%. And Jessica, here's what I'll also say. Like, you got to keep your edibles in a lockbox. Like there are things you have to do as a parent to make sure you are a responsible consumer that are different than if you're by yourself, right? Like
it's the same thing with alcohol. I mean, you're not going to leave your teenage kids home with a full bar and, leave for the weekend.
Like a handle, right? Right. That's exactly right. I mean,
and the mixer's already pre-made.
Exactly. These days, all they have to do is like pop a can or whatever. I mean, I think it's, if you're talking about this concept, which it's critical to talk about, you have to also talk about all the inputs, right? So it's like, when are you consuming? Like, are you doing that at 9 a.m? Like, maybe that's not awesome. Like maybe it is because
if you're drinking at 9 a.m. as well, like, maybe there's some other conversations that need to be had.
Exactly. Right. So I think it's just about like, okay, well, is it Saturday afternoon and like, you kind of want to take a nap, but you can't. And so instead of taking a nap, you decide to have half an edible. Like, my opinion is like, you are amazing. Like, that's exactly, like, my opinion is good for you, mama, because you know what? You're taking care of yourself and you're taking care of your kids. And that's incredible.